For 6 months, I opened my home to my son and his wife while they saved money to finish their new house. I paid the bills, gave them privacy, and never asked for rent. Then one morning, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eyes and calmly told me to move out because her parents were coming. She expected tears. Instead, I called a locksmith. My name is Helen Vance, and I had spent 30 years working as a high school librarian to afford the coastal home I had always dreamed about. The house was modest but beautiful, with ocean views, pine trees, and a quiet garden I had carefully built over the years. It was supposed to become my peaceful retirement home, until my son Julian needed somewhere to stay. Julian and his wife Heather had been building their own house and needed several months to save money. I welcomed them without hesitation because Julian was my son, and I wanted to help him get ahead. At first, everything seemed fine. Then Heather began changing little things around my house, and those little changes slowly became something much bigger. She rearranged my kitchen because her cooking routine required it. Then, she turned my formal living room into her home office and suggested that I use the porch instead. Whenever I complained, Julian gave me the same tired explanation. He would tell me that Heather was under pressure and that everything was temporary. Because I loved my son, I kept choosing peace over confrontation. That changed on a bright Monday morning, when Heather walked into my kitchen wearing an expensive coat and announced that her parents were arriving the following week. She said they needed the main bedroom because of their joint problems. Then, she casually informed me that I should spend the summer at an RV park near the bay. Julian sat nearby with his laptop open, but he refused to look at me. I asked Heather to repeat what she had just said because I wanted to make sure I had heard her correctly. She explained that her parents deserved the comfortable rooms, while I could easily stay somewhere else for a few weeks. Julian finally spoke and asked me not to make things difficult. That was when I understood the truth. They were not asking me to share my home, they were trying to remove me from it. I did not argue with Heather. I did not call relatives or demand that Julian choose between his wife and his mother. I simply walked outside, took out my phone, and called Arthur, the locksmith who had handled my property years earlier. I told him I wanted every exterior lock replaced with high-security electronic systems. He immediately noticed that something was wrong, but I only told him I was updating my home security. When I returned inside, Heather was still sitting at the kitchen island, as if nothing unusual had happened. She asked whether I had reconsidered moving out before her parents arrived. I told her that I had heard her clearly and that she had made her position very clear. I then drove into town, separated my finances, and removed the secondary debit card I had given Julian for household expenses. That afternoon, I met with my financial advisor and reviewed the property documents. The deed confirmed what I already knew. The house belonged entirely to me. Julian had never paid the mortgage, and neither he nor Heather had a lease. They had been living there because I had invited them. My advisor explained that I could establish clear security rules and begin the proper process for ending their occupancy. That evening, I found Julian sitting alone on the patio. I told him what Heather had said and reminded him that the house had been paid for through my years of work and the life insurance left after his father died. Julian tried to defend his wife, saying she only wanted her parents to be comfortable. I told him gently that comfort for her parents would never require removing me from my own bedroom. By Wednesday morning, Heather had started placing boxes outside my bedroom as though my departure was already decided. She discussed furniture arrangements with her mother over the phone and even talked about turning my reading corner into a sitting area. I ignored every provocation. Instead, I secured my family documents, my grandmother belongings, and my private journals inside my locked office. At 8:30, Arthur arrived with his equipment. Heather came outside and immediately demanded to know why someone was changing the locks. I explained that it was my property and my decision. She insisted the existing locks were perfectly fine and complained that electronic keypads would make things harder for her parents. I calmly told her that the security of my home was not a family vote. Julian finally stepped outside and saw Arthur installing the new hardware. Heather demanded that he stop me, but Julian looked at the work and then looked at me. For once he did not make excuses for his wife. He simply told Heather that it was my house and she needed to let me handle it. By that afternoon, every exterior entrance had new locks, and I was the only person with the master code. That evening, I asked Julian to meet me privately in my study. I placed a copy of the deed beside a formal notice requiring him and Heather to make plans for another home. I explained that I had welcomed them because I loved them, but generosity did not mean surrendering ownership. Julian looked stunned when I told him his temporary access would expire at the end of the week. He asked whether I was really serious about making them leave. I told him I was not throwing my son away. I was taking my home back. He had a good job, a future, and the ability to provide for his own household. I reminded him that avoiding conflict had allowed Heather to cross every boundary I had tried to establish. This time, I would not rescue him from the consequences. Friday arrived with a strange calm. Heather packed several suitcases and repeatedly spoke to her parents about how everything would be handled. Julian quietly admitted that he had suggested they book a hotel, but Heather refused because she believed I would eventually surrender when her parents arrived. I told Julian that she had misunderstood me. I was not interested in creating a public argument. I was simply prepared to enforce the boundary I had already set. Before Heather left for the airport, I waited until her SUV disappeared down the road. Then I removed every remaining temporary access code from my security system. I gathered her boxes, groceries, clothing, and personal belongings and placed everything carefully on the covered side porch. I reset the house to the way I liked it, opened the curtains, made tea, and sat quietly near the front window. A little after 2 vehicles rolled into the driveway. Heather stepped out with her parents and Julian. She approached my front door confidently and entered the code she had always used. The keypad flashed red. She tried again, harder this time, but the lock remained closed. Julian checked his phone and quietly told her his temporary access had also been disabled. Heather immediately began pounding on my door. I opened the viewing panel and calmly told her that her belongings were waiting on the side porch and that everyone needed to leave my property. Her father finally understood what was happening and asked whether the house really belonged to me. When Heather confirmed it, he pulled her away from the door in embarrassment. Julian gathered her luggage and told her they were going to a hotel. 2 weeks later, Julian returned alone. He stayed on the porch instead of walking inside and told me they had rented an apartment. He had also agreed to marriage counseling because he finally understood how badly his avoidance had damaged our family. He apologized for failing to defend me when Heather crossed the line. I told him that recognizing the mistake was a beginning, but respect would have to become part of their relationship. After he left, I stood inside my quiet house and listened to the ocean beyond the windows. For months, I had been walking through rooms that no longer felt like mine because I was afraid of upsetting my son. That morning taught me something I should have understood much earlier. Helping family is an act of love, but allowing someone to control your life is not. My home was mine, and so was my peace.